She is just a footnote in this company. That is what Vice President Richard told the executive board of an $80 million acquisition firm right to my face. He laughed, smoothed his designer tie, and treated me like a ghost in the very glass boardroom I had spent 3 years maintaining. But Richard made one massive mistake. He did not bother to read the final page of the acquisition agreement. When lead counsel for the buyers flipped to Section 9 and asked who holds the primary assignee rights, I slowly raised my hand. Richard smiled, expecting me to hand him a bottle of water. Then he saw the corporate stamp next to my signature. The color drained from his face entirely. The buyer's top attorney looked at Richard, leaned in close, and whispered 4 words that ended his career. "Oh, you are so screwed." For 3 years, I worked as a senior legal analyst under Richard Sterling at Apex Horizon Holdings. Richard was the kind of boss who stole credit for breakfast and blamed his team for rain. I spent 80 hours a week combing through patents, liability releases, and real estate deeds while Richard played golf with board members. Whenever major investors visited, Richard made sure I was banished to the back row, treating me like an overpaid secretary rather than the person keeping the company legally afloat. 6 months ago, Apex Horizon began negotiations to be acquired by a massive venture capital conglomerate for $80 million. The buyout hinged entirely on a proprietary logistics software patent that streamlined supply chains. What Richard did not know was that the patent was never fully owned by Apex Horizon. It belonged to an independent entity that I created before joining the firm. When Apex began using it, I executed a licensed assignment clause that granted me personal control over any sale or transfer involving the technology. Richard was so obsessed with taking credit for the deal that he signed every preliminary document without reading the fine print. He spent weeks belittling me, cutting my bonus, and reminding everyone that I was merely administrative staff who should be grateful for a chair in the room. The day of the final signing arrived. The room was packed with billionaire investors, high-priced attorneys, and corporate executives. Richard took the head of the table, puffing his chest out. When the lead buyer asked a routine question about asset transfer rights, Richard cut me off before I could speak, declaring loudly that I was just a footnote who did not understand high-stakes finance. The lead counsel for the buyer adjusted his glasses, looked down at page 42 of the master agreement, and froze. He pointed to the document and asked the room who held the primary assignee rights for the core software suite. I raised my hand, clearly and quietly. Richard scoffed and told me to put my hand down, thinking I was interrupting. But the lawyer did not look at Richard. Leather Binder looked at Richard and whispered that he was completely screwed. Because I held total assignment control, the $80 million buyout could not happen without my personal approval. Within 10 minutes, the entire board realized Richard had walked them into a corner by ignoring my authority. I refused to authorize the transfer until Richard was removed for incompetence and my share was paid out in full. Richard was fired that afternoon, stripped of his stock options, and escorted out of the building. I walked away with full equity, recognition, and a massive settlement. Never let anyone treat you like a footnote in your own story. That day taught everyone in that boardroom a lesson they will never forget. Standing up for yourself and protecting your hard work is standard practice when building a career. If you want to make sure your contribution is recognized, always keep your paperwork tight and your focus clear.